Our unsatisfying withdrawal from Afghanistan may have happened in 2021, but it did not result from the 20 weeks or even 20 months that led up to those planes rumbling down the tarmac for the last time. Rather, it was the cumulative effect of 20 years of trial and error. Despite all our efforts, all the sacrifices of our nation, our NATO allies and partners, and most significantly, the Afghan people, we were unable to build an Afghan state able to sustain itself in relative peace, win legitimacy among the Afghan people, and thrive in the community of nations. We need to understand why. There's been a tendency in some retrospectives to confine the look at the U.S. role on the ground in Afghanistan narrowly. That is, only to what the U.S. military and civilian agencies did in Afghanistan itself. The full story, however, must include a sober look at the broader picture, the role of regional players, especially Pakistan, the attitudes and politics of our European allies, the growing problem of Russia, the capabilities and mindset in Washington, in our military, intelligence community, State Department, and other agencies, and ultimately, the executive branch's ability to integrate all these elements into a coherent whole through the policy-making processes across 4 presidential administrations. Only such a deep and broad examination will render a full understanding of how our involvement in Afghanistan ended as it did. Now, I have a set of 5 observations. Because of time limits, I won't go into them in detail. They very much parallel the classic definition of strategy as the alignment of ends, ways, and means over time. That's the sort of organizing principle of my observations. Again, I'll just outline these and leave the rest to for the record. I think the roots of our failure in Afghanistan were not at the tactical level. I think they were at the strategic level. And by strategic level, I mean decisions taken here in Washington, the strategic capital, and how we made those decisions. The surge is a good example, but equally important than how we oversaw the implementation of those decisions. So let me just quickly tick through these observations, and then as quickly as possible, we can move to your questions. First of all, when setting our national goals, the strategic ends, we must have a realistic picture of what would be possible in a specific setting. A deep understanding of the setting must be grounded in facts, not emotions, aspirations, or caricatures. We should apply a healthy dose of humility as to what is possible in places as complex and foreign as Afghanistan. That's ends, ways. While our repeated strategic reviews and policy statements acknowledge the importance of emphasizing political and diplomatic approaches, we often relied mostly on military ways, military methods, rather than blending various methods into a mutually reinforcing whole. The best example here is that during the surge, we denied ourselves the potential value of reaching out to the Taliban diplomatically. Arguably, at a time when our military pressure was greatest, we were reluctant and hesitant and slow to complement that military approach with a diplomatic outreach. Not because of the promise that we could solve the war diplomatically. This wasn't about to end the war. But there was a significant potential, assessed by our intelligence community, that we could perhaps splinter the Taliban in a useful way, and therefore complement the counterinsurgency campaign on the ground, the military campaign, with a diplomatic approach, a diplomatic way, if you will. Look, the short history of Afghanistan, in my view, is a strategic disconnect between ends, what we aim to do, which tend to be rather ambitious, and the resources, the means that we marshaled to actually accomplish those ends. So this strategic disconnect, I think, plagued us the entire 20 years. Fourth, in the execution phase, the strategy has to be constantly assessed and reassessed, or the alignment of ends, ways, and means falls out of alignment. And so things happen on the ground. Of course, famously, the enemy has a vote. but the status of al-Qaeda changed over time. What was happening in Pakistan was fluid. The reliability of the Afghan government as a partner changed over time. So there were a lot of conditions that were changing. My observation here, the fourth observation, is that we spent a lot of time making decisions, and that got a lot of bandwidth. We spent, in my view, too little time focused on where the rubber really meets the road in strategy, which is execution, implementation. And I think that deserves examination. And my fifth observation is that we should remember the strategic value of partners and allies. You know, it was on September 12th, 2001, that the North Atlantic Council in Brussels voted that the attacks by al-Qaeda on Washington and New York the day before, September 11th, actually triggered Article 5. For the first and only time to this day, 76 years of NATO history, first and only time Article 5 has been triggered. We should remember that. And while we sometimes dismiss or diminish, even denigrate the contribution of our allies, we should remember that they lost 1,000 troops in combat, and that to the end, we had the benefit of tens of allies and partners serving alongside of us in Afghanistan. We did something right here in terms of bringing those together. And then finally, Madam Chair, every hearing breaks down at some point. Okay, it's not always with the
not
first
at the
witness.
beginning.
I always do what Jamila tells me. I just want to draw a distinction between these observations and lessons, right? Because in my view, you don't actually have a lesson, or especially a lesson learned, until someone's actually doing something with it. So changing organizational structures, processes, personnel assessments, and so forth. So it's great to gather these observations, but that doesn't equate to lessons learned.